Outside, our dwarf spruce has a fresh white hat of snow. Pine cones hang from her branches, fat and heavy like earrings, pulling down the lobes. Cardinals compliment her chapeau, gossiping beneath her nose like velvet red lips, moving ever so slightly so as to not smudge. I think she looks so pretty, this spruce, dolled up for a dreary winter afternoon, smiling at the corner of the house and waving to runny-nosed dog walkers who pass. Welcome to Games in the Glade, a stress-free gaming news and reviews podcast. I'm your host, Tina Kelly, and I'll guide you through some recent news in the gaming world and give my review of a game I think you'll enjoy. Today I'll be discussing the Tabletop RPG Bloodstone, the open source Afro Hair library, a list of great games by Black developers from Shawn Alexander, the Consumer Electronics Show, some Nintendo news, and the charity event Awesome Games Done Quick. I'll be reading your responses to last week's question about your video game resolutions for this year, and giving part one of my review of Death's Door, the game that the Friends of the Forest voted for on Patreon. And I'll finish up by asking you about your favorite video game soundtracks. On with the news. As a Bloodborne fan, I'm always looking for something to scratch that itch, and on Twitter, I think I found something that my fellow hunters might enjoy. Bloodstone, a Bloodborne-inspired action horror fantasy tabletop RPG, launched on January 7th, 2022. Designed by Matteo Sciuteri, it's a streamlined version of Blades in the Dark. Here's the scenario. A mad priest officiates a blood ritual that corrupts the inhabitants of Helluweir, damning the entire city. When the blood moon rises, the citizens transform into mindless monsters. The priest's apostles drink the corrupted blood of the people of Helluweir in an attempt to ascend to the realm of ancients. Then it's up to the players of the game to hunt down an apostle before they too succumb to the bloodthirst. If you've ever wanted to roleplay a hunter outside of Bloodborne, this sounds like a good opportunity to do so. As for the mechanics of the game, it's got a Souls-like stamina system, but simplifies your stats to 3 attributes: prowess, resolve, and wit. Character creation seems quick and easy. Sciuteri says it'll take 1 minute to answer the guiding questions for character creation, and each hunter has an origin, a style of dress, and their weapons to make them unique. Now, Sciuteri, an Italian dev, has worked on several video game and tabletop role-playing RPG projects in the past, which you can find on his itch.io page. I'll link to that in the description of this episode, so you can see Bloodstone for yourself. The open source Afro Hair library will launch Juneteenth, that's Sunday, June 19th, of 2023, featuring the world's first database of 3D modeled black hairstyles. The library seeks to address the lack of positive, accurate, and frankly loving renditions of black hair and hairstyles, as the current state of black hairstyle selection is miserable, and the texture and quality of that hair is, at best, non-representational, and at worst, offensive. Players have a paltry few styles to select from when they boot up a character creation in any game that isn't like NBA 2K22, and those styles are normally limited to cornrows, dreads, bald, or a fade, maybe a mini fro or a big fro. And typically, the hairstyle options lean towards the masculine. Developed by Professor A.M. Dark, the open-source Afro Hair library is a feminist, anti-racist resource for digital artists and 3D content creators, as they explain on the library's current webpage. It's not just a library of hair. It's a way to change the way we think of black hair, the way we treat black hair, and the way we see black hair. Currently, it's a problem. Trone L. Dowd, in his Vice article on the open-source Afro Hair library, presented several examples of truly outrageous black hair modeling, like last year's shooter RPG Outriders, which featured scraggly and unkempt mini-fros and dreads. Dowd also mentioned The Sims 4, which modeled their fro on cauliflower? And Professor Dark herself points out the few and terrible examples of black hair that one can find in the current 3D asset marketplaces. Hair that's attached to models that enforce racist stereotypes of black people being poor, uncivilized, even enslaved. If these are the black people that content creators and artists see again and again, these will be the black folks they replicate in their works. Professor Dark and her collaborators are changing that with their faithful and careful renditions of black hair. And by contributing to this free library, they're also changing the industry. Professor Dark wants to uplift and empower marginalized developers, artists, and creators whose work would otherwise be sidelined in favor of white Eurocentric portrayals of people. Now these creators' work has a place to shine, to be seen and appreciated, and to find use. Honestly, this project is going to change game development and digital media projects forevermore, and for good. The open source Afro Hair Library will launch, as I said, Juneteenth of 2023, and you can find more through Professor A.M. Dark's portfolio, which I'll link in the description of this episode. I'll also link to Trone Dowd's thorough and compelling Vice article in the library. It's a fantastic read if you want to learn more about Professor Dark's project, as well as the state of black hair and representation in media today. So I was on Twitter, because that's where I get my gaming news, and I found a lovely thread by Shawn Alexander Allen covering great games made by black creators in 2021. Allen, who is the founder of New Challenger, which is spelled, by the way, NU Challenger, and the developer of Treachery in Beatdown City, made a similar thread last year that he's linked in his first tweet of this year's thread. So if you want to see what you missed out in 2022, check that out. But as for 2021, Allen leads off with New Challenger's own Don't Give Up, A Cynical Tale, developed by Taco Pizza Cat Games, which looks amazing. Punchy dialogue, a colorful and lively world split into two, reality and subconscious, both boasting interesting characters and quick-paced battles. I'm hoping this isn't a kiss of death to say, but this one looks like it would be appealing to Mother fans like me or Undertale fans. Next up, a game I am dying to watch a playthrough of as soon as I have the time. An Airport for Aliens currently run by dogs by Strange Scaffold, which is a dev team led by Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulators developer Xalavier Nelson Jr. In it, you're a human trying to reunite with your fiancé by traveling through interstellar airports, which are, of course, run by stock photos of dogs who need you to complete tasks for them before they'll get you your boarding pass. This one I've heard is a surprisingly touching tale filled with witty humor and, of course, good doggos. And I only mention that I'm going to watch a playthrough of this one instead of play it because it is in first person, and unfortunately I have first person motion sickness, but I can watch a playthrough of it on my phone on a teeny tiny screen and not get too queasy. Kena Bridge of Spirits, developed by Ember Labs, also made Allen's list. The indie darling with graphics worthy of the PS5's hardware that swept folks off their feet last year. While Kena was Ember Labs' debut game, brothers Mike and Josh Greer have worked on projects for Coca-Cola, Hisense, and Major League Baseball, as well as producing the fan film A Terrible Fate, a stunning labor of love that renders the original story of Skull Kid from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. This film was embedded in my brain, and I wished and hoped for a remake of Majora's Mask by Ember Lab for so long, and yet I had forgotten their names. And now I'm never going to be able to forget Ember Lab. Now, I don't want to lift Allen's thread in its entirety. I think it's truly worth a read through yourself to hear all of his recommendations from last year. And please do follow him on Twitter at Shawn AA. That's Shawn with a W, the word double, and the letter A. I followed him right away, as insights like this into the indie world are very hard to find. I'll link to the thread as well as to Allen's Twitter in the description of this video. The Consumer Electronics shows spanned from the 4th to the 7th, debuting some new tech and hardware, of course. But I have this thing where I forget everything about how computers work and what's inside them until something goes wrong with mine. I don't pay a lot of attention to tech upgrades and hardware, but I do care about video games and consoles. So I've plucked a bit of news for you about that. Sony announced the PSVR 2 at the Consumer Electronics Show 2022, obviously the next step up from their virtual reality endeavor with the PSVR. The PSVR 2 will come with a 4K HDR display, head and eye tracking technology, a 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, and a 110-degree field of view. Like its predecessor, the PSVR will have an OLED display and a 120Hz refresh rate. Now, there's no hard date given for the release of the system, though some are speculating 2023, I don't know. According to Tabitha Baker over at Games Radar, the head tracking technology will eliminate the need for gameplay to be directed by glowing lights. And Baker also reports that the new Sense controllers were also announced for the PSVR 2. You'll need a PS5 to run the PSVR 2, so good luck getting a hold of one of those by 2023, everybody. Thanks to Tabitha Baker for the information on the Consumer Electronics Show. I'll link to her article in the description of this episode. Sony announced a game in addition to their spanking new VR experience, Horizon Call of the Mountain. Guerrilla Games, the developers of Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West, are working with Firesprite, the team that made the Sony Playroom for the PS4, in order to create this VR game. Set in the Horizon universe, you'll play as a new character that explores the wilds, meeting Aloy, some of her friends, and new characters along the way. If you've not played the original, now is a great time to give it a try, by the way. It's a lovely action-adventure about making your own place in the world, and also fighting robot dinosaurs. You can watch a teaser trailer for Horizon Call of the Mountain over at the Sony blog post for the game's announcement, which I'll link in the description of this episode. And here's some breaking news as of the day I'm writing this. Firesprite, who is working on Call of the Mountain, has taken over development of the Twisted Metal reboot from Lucid Studios. This story is coming from Matt Wales over at Eurogamer. Thank you for that. Wales reports that Matt Southern, a director of many of the MotorStorm games, was working with Lucid Studios in Liverpool and recently made the switch to Firesprite, also situated in Liverpool. Coincidentally, as I mentioned, the game has changed hands from Lucid to Firesprite. So possibly good news for Twisted Metal fans who are craving more wacky vehicular combat. Thanks again, Matt Wales, for that article. New Twisted Metal game reportedly now being handled by Sony's Firesprite Studio, which I will link to in the description of this episode if you want to read more about that, and also some rumors for TV plans for the franchise. How about a slew of Nintendo news? Nintendo put up a trailer of the copy abilities and co-op play in Kirby and the Forgotten Land on January 12th. I watched this video with my brother, who I used to play Kirby and the Crystal Shards with, as well as Kirby's Epic Yarn. It looks like lots of classic Kirby copy abilities are coming back to the Forgotten Land, but reimagined for a 3D space. Like the Poppy Brothers bombs or the tornado ability, giving Kirby a little movement bump forward as he cyclones up his opponents. Certain abilities also seem important for unlocking areas, like using the hammer ability to mash in buttons to open up doors. And the teaser also shows off new powers, or at least what looks new to me, like a drill hat that allows you to travel underground, as well as a silly-looking horn-ended gun that lets you blast enemies away. Forgotten Land also features co-op, which I so appreciate because I grew up playing Kirby co-op only. Your co-op partner will be a Bandana Waddle Dee, who comes armed with a spear. It seems like Waddle Dee can throw his spear, rain down spearheads as he helicopters above enemies, and also jab and poke at enemies to help Kirby out with the combat. It also seems like your goal in the game is to free other Waddle Dees who have been trapped in cages by dark birds. What really got me excited was the bevy of minigames that they're offering, including like a food service minigame, a fishing minigame, and a capsule gacha minigame. I'm not sure how open world this game is going to be, as the trailer shows an overworld map that Kirby travels through with his warp star, so we'll have to see if it's possible to walk from place to place or if it's just hub to hub only. The game launches March 25th, 2022, and I am looking forward to it. I'll be sure to link to the trailer in the description of this episode. And some more Nintendo news for you. Astroneer, the sandbox adventure game by System Era Softworks about colonizing planets, building structures, and collecting resources, is now available for the Nintendo Switch. You can play solo, but I hear it's better with friends. Astroneer came out in early access in 2016, releasing fully in 2019, and has won several Webby Awards for its art direction, game design, and user experience. While there's no major story for the game, each level has goals to be reached, so you feel like you're achieving something by the end of the level. If you're looking for a fun, low-stakes co-op experience that lets you be creative, maybe give Astroneer a try. I'll link to the announcement trailer in the description. And last but not least, here's a limited time offer for Nintendo Switch Online members. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is free to play until 2:59 a.m. Eastern on Friday, January 21st. The offer started on the 13th, giving people about a week to play and enjoy the 2019 Switch puzzle game, which, according to Sam Makovich over at Ars Technica, is plenty of time to beat the game. This fun puzzler was born out of a bonus level concept from Super Mario 3D World, where players navigate a 3D puzzle box as a toad or a toadette who cannot jump, so they must rotate the camera and solve the level with the power of creative thinking. And, as a reminder, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is fully unlocked for free. This isn't a 1 or 2 level demo, but the full game, which you can play if you have the Nintendo Switch Online $20 membership, up until 3 a.m. January 21st. So get in your fun while you can. You can find the free trial if you go to the Nintendo eShop, look at the menu on the left-hand side that says Nintendo Switch Online, and check the Game Trials section for Captain Toad. And if you want to read Sam Makovich's thoughts on Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker on Ars Technica, I'll link to that article in the description. By the time you hear this, Awesome Games Done Quick, the week-long charity event benefiting the Prevent Cancer Foundation, will have wrapped up, though as I write and record this, we're still in the throes of this thrilling event. AGDQ, the wintertime speedrunning event, as opposed to Summer Games Done Quick, garners tens of thousands of viewers every year, raising millions for charities thanks to the incredible feats of talented gamers. The selection process is rigorous. The best runners balance speed and entertainment. Participants not only need to achieve high scores and world records in the fastest time of completion for their chosen game by perfectly executing techniques that manipulate their game, such as phasing through walls, overpowering bosses with broken moves, and using rhythmic button pressing to chain together movements in a way that makes their character zip through levels faster than your eye can track. But they also must be able to put on a good show by doing so, being able to entertain an audience of 70 to 100,000 people by explaining the story of their game, the history of various techniques and the skips they practice, as well as interact with the commentators and community. And most of all, they need to be able to think fast when things go wrong, because foul language and sour moods don't get many donations for charity, nor do they typically earn you a ticket back to the next big event. And these events are huge for speedrunners who, despite being world record holders in their chosen games, may not have more than a few dozen people watching them at any time on their own Twitch channels. AGDQ offers a platform for these gamers to be exposed to a wider audience of enthusiasts who may not have heard of them or even of their chosen game. AGDQ is such a treat for viewers because of all the thought and hard work that goes into it. It's a ritual, a tradition. Every year I tune in throughout the day and have it on in the background. One year, I hand scrubbed my entire living room carpet to a block of Final Fantasy games, enjoying the gentle chatter of the runners and their couch and commentators as I got year-old cat stains up from the floor. Now, when I say a couch of commentators, it's because the event used to be in person, with a live broadcast running on Twitch. Runners would sit on the ubiquitous beige couch, positioned in front of a monitor and a console or a PC, with their game of choice loaded up, and play side by side with other people. Those people would be friends or family, other runners of the game, and color commentators who were familiar with the game. There would also be a donation reader who was sitting in an adjacent chair by another computer, reading off donations as they came in to acknowledge the contributions of viewers, selecting the funniest or most interesting or most touching comments from seas of donations. Behind the couch, there were rows and rows of folding chairs, occupied by live members of the audience who paid to see these games run in person. Don't worry, they weren't looking at whatever small screen the game was running on. The feed would be projected onto large canvases that attendants could watch. The audience was a palpable part of the event, cheering, chanting, booing, clapping, and all in all surging with energy throughout. GDQ has changed a bit with the pandemic. The runs are now done from the comfort of runners' homes, using their webcams to get a feed and sharing a screen through broadcasting software. Commentators and donation readers don't share a physical space anymore, instead chipping in over voice software, thankfully without painful delays. And the audience of cheering nerds is now simulated with audience emote reactions in the chat being translated to cheering icons of dinosaurs in a small box in the bottoms of some of the speedruns. Despite all these changes, however, the energy is still there. The excitement of a world record being broken in real time, the hilarity of a prominent speedrunner being badgered by their good-natured friends, and the thrill of everyone's small contributions amounting to something huge, something special, it's all still there. This season's event benefits the Prevent Cancer Foundation, which I mentioned before. Their mission is to save lives with prevention, early detection, and research into cancer. When it comes to the research, the PCF has a specific award named after the Awesome Games Done Quick event that's been granted to several researchers to help them pursue their studies. Recent recipients of the award include Dr. Lemore Applebaum, a radiation oncologist at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, who is researching the use of medical records and microbiome for predicting pancreatic cancer. Dr. Sigrid Carlson, an assistant attending epidemiologist at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, is working towards improving prostate cancer screening technology. And also Dr. Ayushi Oberoi, a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, is exploring host microbiome interactions during UVB-associated skin cancers to find new biomarkers and therapeutics for the prevention of skin cancer. And that's just the 2021 class of researchers. There have been at least a decade of recipients of this award. So now you know what that money's going towards. Let's talk about some of the amazing runs to watch from this year. Every year, the Pokemon block, which is several hours of different speedrunners playing various Pokemon games, is always entertaining. I tuned in for the Pokemon Crystal Key Item Randomizer race between 3 runners, Keyzeron, 360 Chrism, and Shenanigans. Let's break that down for a second because it's pretty dense. So as you probably know, Pokemon is a franchise about a young person trying to become the greatest trainer of creatures who battle for glory. So, the 3 runners of this category were trying to beat the game as quickly as they could, but with the extra added twist. Normally, when you beat masters of Pokemon who have their own landmark gyms for their Pokemon type of choice, be it grass, fire, water, etc., those gym leaders typically give you a key item. That might be a technique to teach your Pokemon that allows you to travel to or through different areas, like the move Flash, which allows your Pokemon to illuminate pitch black caves, or the move Waterfall, which allows your Pokemon to travel up waterfalls in order to get to higher up areas. Usually, they'll also give you a badge, of which you need several to prove that you're worthy of challenging the Elite Four trainers at the end of the game. Well, that's the normal trajectory of a Pokemon game. In the randomizer performed this year, those key items, badges, moves, things that are critical for progressing through the game, were all randomized. So the water gym leader won't give you the move that you need to travel through water. So runners have to use their knowledge of the game and its progression sequences to find out where they can go next with whatever items they do have as they try to find the key items they need in order to get to the end. It's kind of like an Easter egg hunt in your backyard, except for some of the eggs contain a pair of shoes you need to walk over the gravelly area where all the other eggs are, but you don't know where the shoe egg is. And to make things even more difficult, every Pokemon in the game is also randomized. Normally, you pick between 3 elemental starters: a fire, a water, and a grass type. This trio beats each other in a rock, paper, scissors triangle of hierarchy. You can also expect in a normal run of Pokemon to find certain Pokemon in certain areas. Your beginning area, for example, will have low-level normal type Pokemon, maybe a flying type bird Pokemon, and some bug type Pokemon here and there. And also in a regular run of the game, you'll fight certain types of Pokemon at each gym. A water type gym will have water type Pokemon. An electric type gym will have electric type Pokemon. All those Pokemon have predetermined moves they learn that have different typings that align with them. So for example, your fire type dog will know at least one fire type move, and maybe another move thrown in like a dark type biting move, and so on. But in this randomized run, not only are the gym types randomized, so are the Pokemon, and so are all the moves that every Pokemon knows. So your grass type Pokemon might now have fire type moves it could never possibly learn. Your psychic type Pokemon might know fighting moves. Everything is in chaos. It's no longer safe to put out your electric Pokemon against a water type Pokemon, which is a type it should dominate, because that water type Pokemon might know Earthquake, which is a ground type move that devastates electric type Pokemon. It's complete chaos. And the kind of chaos that requires a steady mind, a deep knowledge of the game as it normally should function, and the ability to think on your feet. The runners for the AGDQ Pokemon Crystal Key Item Randomizer Race had all 3 of those, and on top of that, they each have a great sense of humor. Shenanigans, Keyzeron, and 360 Chrism have been speedrunning for years, so when they get thrown a curveball, or when things go wrong, or in Shenanigans' case, maybe a runner says that Bulbasaur isn't that great of a Pokemon and gets roasted by the people in their donation messages, forcing him to write a lengthy apology to a digital creature for disparaging them, they're able to roll with the punches and keep things entertaining. I loved this run because the runners kept things light. Keyzeron is known for doing some very good and also very bad impressions of the kind of noises that Pokemon makes. His Jinx impression is like, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to do the rest of it. Sorry, that's terrible. Anyway, so viewers will donate to test his knowledge of Pokemon cries and calls, and he, on the spot, has to do his best impression. And it's great. It's better than mine. I highly recommend giving the randomizer run a watch. I won't spoil who won the race, but it is a fun 2.5 hours of wild strategies, twists, turns, and goofs. I'm including a link to the recording of the run so you can catch up on that amazing performance. The second run I would encourage you to watch is the GeoGuessr run by Havrid and John Mumrick. GeoGuessr is a geography game based on Google Maps, which plops you down onto a specific point somewhere in the world. You've got the street view, so you can see landmarks around you, the landscape, the streets and nature and all that stuff. You can click down the street to take your view further through the area that you're in, allowing you to look for other indicators of where you are, like license plates, business signs, any kind of written language indication that might help you figure out where in the world you are. Once you think you might know where you've been placed, you drop a pinpoint on a map, and the game will tell you how close you were to being right about your coordinates. You can get up to 5,000 points for guessing within 180 meters of your exact location. Most people are satisfied with guessing the correct country, or maybe region or states, maybe city. But for this GeoGuessr speedrun at AGDQ, the 2 runners had to guess the exact coordinates of where they were dropped. The exact intersection they're placed at, the exact part of whatever highway they're on. There are 52,000 handpicked locations in GeoGuessr, so ostensibly it's impossible, right? But they did it. Perfectly. Precisely. 5 times in a row. And not only that, they had to do it cooperatively, meaning that one player had only the street view of the location, able to see the trees and the buildings and the signs, and the other player had the map view, able to see road names and intersections and business titles, and each runner had to communicate to the other what they're looking at in precise terms so the other could hunt down important information. And they would also alternate between locations as well. Whoever had the street view would need to start with an informed guess of where they were in the world. So let's say if they saw an Italian license plate, for example, they'd say, "We're in Italy." And the other person would need to zoom in on their map and piece together the information to start making guesses where in Italy they were. You wouldn't believe the kinds of things they're able to use to guess where they are. Street poles in South America, for example, have some distinct, top nuggets that the wires pass through. Or if the sun is in the north, you know you're in the southern hemisphere. If the soil looks really red where you are, you might be in Brazil. A large black sticker on a telephone pole tells you that you're in mainland Malaysia specifically, not the island part of Malaysia that's not connected to the Asian continent. These runners have an incredible wealth of knowledge of the world, able to pinpoint Botswana in half a second, decide what major road they're on, and within 4 minutes, be able to tell that they're beside a cafe and a border checkpoint in Groversburg. It's a brisk 40-minute run, and Havard and John Mumrick guess 5 locations perfectly with great teamwork. I'll link that in the description so you can watch it too. Okay, one more run to watch. It's so hard to pick because I watched dozens of them, and they're all really special for many reasons. I want to talk about the Pumpkin Jack run that's done by Jaxler this year. The commentators for this run were Ruby, aka Corundum Core, whose pronouns are she, they, and Brian Nato, who uses any pronouns. And the pronoun identification is a wonderful change made in recent years that has promoted a safer, more inclusive space for runners of any gender, I feel. I used to watch GDQs of old where chatters would ask what gender a runner was, and some chatters would make snide, derogatory comments towards women, particularly trans runners. Moderation of the chat has improved drastically in the past few years, and the environment has become a welcoming and loving place. It's an important evolution for the event because a welcoming space invites more diverse speedrunners, and it also encourages more people to give to charity. I'm proud that GDQ has become an event where discrimination of any kind is not tolerated. Okay, a quick bit about the game before I talk about Jaxler's speedrun specifically. Pumpkin Jack, developed by Nicholas Masonier and published by Head Up and Beep Japan, is a 3D platformer which Jaxler himself compares to A Hat in Time, the 2017 indie 3D platformer, and the medieval hack and slasher games for the PlayStation 1. In Pumpkin Jack, you, a kind of Halloweenish embodiment of evil with a pumpkin head and a spooky body, fight your way through the world to eliminate the forces of good, including Santa Claus. As a casual game, Pumpkin Jack takes about 5 to 10 hours to beat. As a speed game, a New Game Plus run, which means you have to beat the game and then start your speed run with all the items from your previous save file, which also doesn't include tech that allows the player to travel out of bounds, clocks in at about an hour. I tuned into this run around midnight on Monday, leading into Tuesday the 11th. I had gotten my booster vaccine earlier that day, and I was tossing and turning with chills and feverish heat. I had AGDQ running on my phone to give me something to fall asleep to. So while I was up, I caught the tail end of Jaxler's run. Having no idea what this game was, what hooked me was the runner's infectious enthusiasm. When he nailed a trick, he was grinning ear to ear, and his commentators were so supportive and so thrilled by his execution that I could not stop watching. After the run ended, I went back and I watched it from the very beginning, and that same enthusiasm he had when he was nearing the record-breaking pace had been there from the beginning. Even before his run started, Jaxler was thrilled and stunned by the amount of donations that had already come in for the game. See, at AGDQ, there is incentives for your donations. Your donation can go towards a pool that determines if a bonus game will be played during what would normally be an empty block of time reserved for hardware setup. For instance, Resident Evil Village was a bonus game this year that required a $170,000 pool to be met. Donators had to specifically select that game as where their money would go towards as a part of their donation process. And 4 hours before the game was slated to be played, they had only raised $66,000. Just in the nick of time, with 15 minutes to spare, the audience raised the full $170,000 to get Resident Evil Village to be played right after the Kingdom Hearts 2 run. So, challenges like that are things that people can donate towards. They can also donate for the chance to win prizes, like a full-scale replica of the Master Sword from the Legend of Zelda franchise, or a beefy high-tech custom gaming PC. Maybe they donate towards a one-of-a-kind handmade good, like a Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong crochet plushie set, or licensed merchandise from Fangamer and the Yeti. That's Yeti spelled Yetee. And lastly, to tie back to Jaxler's Pumpkin Jack run, donators can put their charitable dollars towards altering a runner's game superficially. They can choose the name of the main character or the name of the game file in games where you get to choose your names. They can choose what difficulty a game can be played at. They can donate towards extra difficult fights or techniques to be showcased during the given speedrun, or, as in the Pumpkin Jack run, they can choose what cosmetic outfit the character must wear during the run. So, before Jaxler had even begun playing the game, the speedrunning community had already raised about $4,600 between the 6 costume options that are available for Pumpkin Jack, with the Buzzard costume winning with about $1,500 contributed from fans. He was so blown away and so genuinely grateful that his fans and the fans at the AGDQ event as a whole had come together for his game. A game that I hadn't even heard of, and neither had one of his co-commentators who was along for the ride, listening and ready to learn about the game and the tricks that would be used to beat it, just like most of the folks watching the game. As the run progresses, Jaxler and Corundum Core explain how they manipulate the movement in the game by using items to collide with lampposts, causing Pumpkin Jack to rocket forward across difficult-to-traverse areas that might otherwise slow the game down. They discuss the physics of the game, how the Pumpkin Jack character model is designed, and how when it touches surfaces, friction is introduced. To bypass that, speedrunners have to time their jumps perfectly to travel airborne for the most amount of time, chaining their jumps together by using an orb item at the very last second before they hit the ground to cancel out of the last frame of their character's animation and allow them to jump again, instead of having to wait for the character to cool down before moving forwards. A little trick like that might seem so intense just to save a millisecond, but those milliseconds pile up over time, shaving off precious minutes from a speedrun. Jaxler and his co-commentators Couch talk about these strategies in such a way as to make them not only easy to understand, please listen to them, I don't think my condensed versions are very good, but they also are interesting to listeners who may or may not be familiar to speedrunning tech. And that's the hallmark of a good speedrunner, engrossing an audience that's unfamiliar with your game. And a great speedrunner has fun while doing all of that. And Jaxler's run is full of laughs and smiles. Every time he executes a difficult technique, he bursts out in laughter, and this run is quite special. Jaxler attempts a few new techniques in this run that have only been discovered a day or so before, saving minutes of time and delighting everyone on the call, including himself, by doing so. And in skipping so many things in the game with the new tech, here comes a big spoiler for the run, he's able to get a new personal best time and set a new world record for the game. His reaction to the world record time alone is worth a watch. The huge smile, the minute he takes to just breathe, and his overflowing gratitude to everyone who has watched, helped, and run the game Pumpkin Jack. And this highlights something I appreciate about how GDQ has changed in the past few years too. Jaxler takes the time to acknowledge and thank the developers of the game, who have worked with the speedrunning community to make the game more accessible to everyone and more simple to run across all platforms, so that no matter where you play the game, you can still go for a world record. In the past, I used to hear a lot of folks disparaging game devs, calling them lazy for leaving things in or leaving things out of a game that speedrunners would then manipulate to go faster. Nowadays, I hardly hear that kind of down talking about bad games or lazy devs. I think there's a greater awareness and appreciation of games and their developers, a trend which I hope will continue into the future. So, if you want to watch Jaxler's world record setting run, I've included a link to that in the description of this episode. All in all, AGDQ is a wonderful spectacle, and a treat to have twice a year. If you missed these runs, there's always the VODs, but I encourage you to tune in live during SGDQ, Summer Games Done Quick, to feel the energy of everyone coming together for a good cause. I'll try to give you a heads up when that week of fundraising for the Doctors Without Borders is coming up so that you can watch along too. Last episode, I asked you all about your video game resolutions for this year, and here is how you all responded. On Twitter, user Quantum of Phallus said that he is going through his backlog of video games that he never started or never completed, like Persona 5, Nier, or Neo. Although, he's worried that Elden Ring might cut short his ambitions when it comes out, and push those games a little lower down on the list. To that, I say, stay strong, Quantum of Phallus. I believe in you. Zeke, aka BlueShirt02 on Twitter, said that because he was really busy with school and work last year, this year he wants to do a personal goal of playing through all the Souls series of games. Now that's a very tall order, Zeke, especially with Elden Ring adding to that list early this year. I hope you can pace yourself too. When I played through the Souls franchise, I would play a different kind of game in between each entry, often a short indie that's completely unlike Dark Souls. It helped me not get tired of the combat. However, there is a benefit to playing all the games in a row. You'll be really good at that exact style of combat, so pick whatever's best for you and good luck, Zeke. Simply Junior, aka JRTG11384 on Twitter, said that he is trying to buy fewer games as his resolution for this new year. This year he wants to finish up a game before he buys a new one because he feels like he's fallen into the habit of buying something, playing it for a while, and then looking for something new. Now, I think this is something that many of you out there have gone through. Personally, because I play through games on my show, I try to get all the way through a game before I start another. But I also play 2 different games a week to give me some variety. So maybe structuring things like that might help you simply. Maybe only play the same game for like 2 to 3 days in a row, and then switch to another game for like 2 to 3 days, just to keep it interesting before you switch back to game 1. Something like that might work. Justin Torres, aka Deep Fried Water on Twitter, says that he wants to make it to the highest rank in a fighting game this year, which I think is an admirable goal. He says he normally loses interest when it gets difficult to progress in something skill-based, but he's been determined to practice until he reaches his goal, and I am rooting for you, Justin. Take the top seat in Guilty Gear Survive. Now, I don't know a lot about the fighting game community. I just kind of know folks in it. So, I've heard there's a service called Fightcade that you might be interested in. I think it has a Discord community for every fighting game. You might be able to find a good group of folks to practice against and workshop through something like that, so maybe look into it. Lastly, Anthony Ragucci, aka Vagooch on Twitter, says that he's trying to play less games at the same time. He says that he's been getting overwhelmed by playing 5 to 6 games at once, which I can totally understand. At that point, it's difficult to get a quick feel for where you are, what to do, and what buttons do what things in any game that you pick up. It's kind of disorienting. So to accomplish this goal, Anthony says he's going to play Dead Space 3 with a friend, and like many other resolutions, I think an accountability buddy helps. If playing Dead Space 3 with a friend keeps you from playing too many other games, Maybe you can establish a habit of sticking with something until it's complete. Okay, that's all in terms of your resolutions. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in. My resolution this year is to take more eye breaks and stretch breaks when I play. I haven't developed any eye pain, back pain, or wrist pain yet from gaming, but now that I'm trying to beat a new game every 2 weeks, and also writing an extra 10 hours minimum per week, sometimes all in a row, yikes, it's important for me to take preventative measures to keep myself from falling apart. So this year, I'm resolving to take a break every hour when I'm gaming. It's been easier to do offline than online, but I'm going to try to stick with it. So let's all do our best to meet our goals this year. Alright, this is part 1 of my review of Death's Door. I'm going to keep this first part spoiler-free when it comes to the story of the games as well as the music. Instead, I'll be discussing the battle mechanics, the way healing is handled in the game, and how the game fits into the Soulsborne legacy. If you want to play the game, but you need some inspiration to get started, here's my opinion on the way it plays. So, to start off, Death's Door was released July 20th, 2021. It was published by Devolver Digital, the indie powerhouse, and developed by Acid Nerve. Now, Acid Nerve is composed of the 2-person team of Mark Foster and David Fenn, though Death's Door was a collaborative effort with several other developers, including Fritz Olsen, Sarah Morris, Juan Abad, Graham Goring, Jenny Brewer, and Justin Chan. As a side note, I think it's important to acknowledge contributions like this, even though the folks may not be part of the same team, as their work is what got the game out the door at the end of the day. Mark Foster and David Fenn have worked together as Acid Nerve for a very long time, creating games like Titan Souls and Telepaint, as well as several other prototypes and game jams. Fun fact, Titan Souls began as a game jam game. And if you're not familiar with that term, game jams are events where participants try to make a video game from scratch, sometimes working with a team and other time working solo. Participants typically have 24 to 72 hours to produce a playable concept based on a theme. Remember last episode when I talked about that one free game, The Insector? That was part of a game jam which was themed around bugs. So, game jams are great creative exercises to get people to think outside the box, as well as meet other designers who they might gel with. And some game jams are even contests, with the winners receiving accolades and even prize money. But I digress. Back to Death's Door, which did not start as a game jam, but shares some DNA with Acid Nerve's most popular indie, Titan Souls. It's a challenging action-adventure game about a little raven armed with a sword and bow who must reap souls to continue the cycle of life and death. You, as this little raven, are ushered off to your first mission to collect a demonic soul, taught how to use your bow with a small tutorial area, and then you begin your first big battle against a soul that's been in this world for too long. That's where things go awry, and your mission to amass more souls begins. As I promised, I won't spoil story elements of the game. Thankfully, there is so much more to discuss. Let's start off with the combat, which is a huge draw for this game. In Death's Door, you're introduced to a variety of weapons with different speeds and ranges. You've got your standard broadsword, which is given to you at the very beginning, and as you progress through each world, you'll find a new weapon within each of them, giving you different playstyles with which to experiment. I would recommend that, as you find items, equip them, and use them at least once in each new area that you travel through. I found that certain weapons were best for certain encounters, like quick short-ranged weapons for bosses that have a faster attack pattern, maybe slow, powerful weapons for the mini-bosses that have a few but long gaps in their attacks. And of course, your standard sword can handle anything. The good news is there isn't a wrong weapon in the game. I'm pretty sure you could probably even beat the game with the second weapon that I found, an umbrella, which seems to be a joke weapon that deals the least amount of damage. In Death's Door, you'll fight a slew of interesting enemies and bosses. The game introduces you to an enemy type, Let's say the scrabbly little dude who wears a big mask that looks like the spire of a castle to show allegiance to the lord of his domain, who is, of course, a big castle. And then the game will reintroduce that same enemy in a later stage, this time wearing a big urn on his head. It's a cute thematic version of a palette swap, sure, but it also indicates that this new fellow is a little tougher than his spire-headed brother, but can be dealt with in a similar way. A few swings to the dome before he can get his attack in, and he's done. They're simple on their own, but when the game puts you in a room with 5 of them charging at you, now you have to think more strategically. Maybe group them all together and hit them all at once, or pick them off one by one from afar with your arrow if you're afraid of taking collateral damage. Death's Door introduces enemies, acclimates you to them, and then throws them at you by the handful to see if you're able to apply what you've practiced under pressure. And the boss fights are very interesting as well, with some of them making use of a gimmick to progress further in the fight, while others are more a matter of patience and strategy. Like many other action RPGs, you need to observe and learn a boss's attack pattern, stepping in at the right moment between swings or projectiles to smack them up before dodging at the last second to avoid getting punished. Thankfully, there is very little need to grind in the game if you're into exploration, because the game will throw plenty of enemies at you, as well as put secret little deposits of juicy souls chunked away in hidden areas. All you need to do is poke around a little bit, get nosy, and you'll be rewarded for your careful eye. You use the souls that you earn from enemies, bosses, and item pickups to deposit in the Soul Vault back at the Raven's hub world, a bank where the lives of those who are reaped are stored. In exchange for a large amount of souls, you can upgrade your strength to do more damage and extend the reach of your weapon. Upgrading your dexterity allows you to charge your attacks faster and chaining them together quicker. Improving haste improves your walk speed, your dodge time, and the cooldown between your dodges. And increasing your magic power increases the damage that you do with your magic spells and your ranged abilities. It's very uncomplicated, which I appreciate. When I first played Dark Souls, for example, I had no idea what the heck I was looking at when it came to the character attribute screen. Now, Dark Souls is a series of action RPGs from Software, with challenging combat, show-stopping boss fights, and a penchant for punishment. It also has a complex character growth system that allows skilled and knowledgeable players to experiment with different builds. Strength builds, dexterity builds, magic builds, and so on. Now, that includes like 50 different character attributes in Dark Souls 1 that I, a newbie, was faced with, like health, stamina, dexterity, strength, endurance, virility, credit score, higher ability, lovability. Like, what do these mean? Which one do I put points into so I can hit thing hard and not get hit by thing very hard? I like the simplification of Death's Door because every attribute is helpful. There's no lost skill points. Typically in games like this, I usually go full melee strong boy strats. Again, hit hard, do not get hit hard. But I challenged myself to try something different with this game. I put my points into haste and magic first, and then into strength and dexterity, so that way I'd have to get good at magic. I'd have to use it more often. And I didn't regret it. It became another tool in my drawer, something to pull out when I needed to make space between myself and an enemy to keep from getting hit hard. So, I really appreciate the approach that Acid Nerve has taken here, offering the player a reward for exploration and combat, and not letting them squander it on any points that go towards attributes they won't use. Furthermore, an incredible thing about Death's Door that feels revolutionary is that when you die, your precious souls that you've been collecting up until that point to make yourself stronger are not lost, unlike other Souls-likes. In games like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, for example, the EA action-adventure game that many have compared to FromSoft's offerings, when you die, your experience points are transferred to the enemy that took you down, and you must return to them and strike them just once to retrieve your experience points, so that later you can put those experience points into a skill point for throwing your lightsaber, improving your health, developing your force abilities, what have you. In Death's Door, there's no such thing. If you die, you keep all your souls. There's no tedium of recollecting your souls, which I really appreciate for a shorter game, because most people beat Death's Door in 15 to 20 hours to get the full experience. There's no need to grind, as I mentioned, because you're always fighting enemies or collecting soul items. I guess it feels revolutionary because it's one of the few games that encourages you to collect experience without discouraging you from losing it. And honestly, it's a kinder, more enjoyable experience because of it. Death's Door has a really intriguing healing system that they incentivize in a unique way as well. In Death's Door, you don't have an instantly usable way to heal. Unlike the Dark Souls franchise, you don't have an Estus flask, which is an item you have at the ready with many charges in it that allows you to heal in the middle of a fight. Nor can you heal yourself by doing damage to enemies like Hollow Knight, the incredible item-gating Metroidvania game by Team Cherry, where you can strike enemies and build a charge that you can convert into a point of health if you hold down a button for a short period of time. No, in Death's Door, you can only heal yourself at predetermined locations. There's pots of dirt scattered all throughout the world, and you use a seed in that pot to grow a lotus-like flower. When you consume that flower from the pot, you're healed. The flower regenerates when you die, but it otherwise cannot be reused. At first, I hoarded my healing seeds, waiting for the right moment to use them, falling back into a pattern I repeat with most RPGs, in that I try to save all my good items for the end, and then I never need them. So, like in Pokemon, I'll have 100 elixirs that could have healed my cute little creatures fully and restored their attack power, but instead I'll wait till the very last fight to use them, and then I'll still chicken out of that. But then, about a world or two into the game, I came across a sign from the game that it could reward me if I were to use my healing seeds more often. I'll talk about this more in my more spoilery coverage of the game in the next episode, but suffice it to say that the game promised a reward for being more luxurious with my healing. So I went back and I seized the opportunities it had presented me, filling in a bunch of pots with seeds I had found, and I noticed that the pots were very carefully and intentionally placed. The developers of the game did an excellent job placing seed pots outside of rooms where you're about to get into some real hard spots, or you're about to fight a bunch of dudes, or one big bad boy. It's nice to have that refresher before you have to step into a hard battle. I really grew to like this healing system the moment I switched from hoarding the seeds to planting them. Because they're available to you again after you die, there's no loss. There's only pots that are slightly out of reach, but let's say you plant a seed at the beginning of a level, you walk 8 rooms forward, and then you realize you need to heal. The enemies you've beaten don't respawn unless you die, kind of like in Dark Souls, so you can walk back and eat that blooming lotus. Or, more likely, you can find a quick shortcut back that gets you to that room that has the pot in it in a flick of a lever, or even better than that, if you move forward like a room or two, you'll probably find another pot. And the healing seeds themselves are not very difficult to find either. Most are in huge crates, or it'll be on a ledge somewhere, or in the middle of a few challenging enemies. I was never really hurting for healing seeds when I played. Normally I had a couple on hand, and by the time I found another pot, I'd find another seed. Death's Door plays like a Metroidvania in some ways, because there's 4 abilities or spells that you unlock that help you travel throughout the world and reveal secrets. Your arrow ability, for example, comes innate, and it allows you to hit targets from a distance. It has obvious combat implications, making it a nice move to mix in with upfront melee combat. If an enemy is too dangerous to get close to, you can take them out from a distance with your arrows, and you never have to collect ammo. Your arrow power is a spell, which you charge with every successful strike that you land. Thankfully, you can hit destructible items to recharge your spells, not just enemies, and the game always puts enough breakable and infinitely regenerating items in your path, particularly in rooms where there's no enemies to combat, just a room full of puzzles to solve with your abilities. If I may discuss one of the abilities you get in the game, and I really hope this is not too spoilery, you unlock a fire spell fairly early on, which is great for damage, but it can also burn away pesky spiderwebs that block old doors. The way you're introduced to this ability is brilliant. When you walk through the zone where you get the firepower, there are unlit bonfires everywhere that seem to arrange in a particular way, which seem to suggest that if you were to light them all in sequence, you could reach a nearby item. And the game makes you play with some of those bonfires, lighting your arrow ability on fire and sending those arrows through the kindling to light each torch, unlocking a path ahead. So already you're thinking about using this ability even before you get it, and making mental notes here and there about places to come back to when you've got some way of using fire yourself. Opportunities to use these abilities are strewn throughout every level, giving you reasons to return later and find more things you missed. Even your hub world, the grayscale Hall of Doors at the Reaping Commission headquarters, has breakable walls and other interactable objects, offering you more chunks of lore and collectibles if you make the effort to explore them. I think since I've mentioned this a few times in this review, I should address this now. I know it's passé to compare games to Dark Souls. It's become lazy shorthand in video game journalism to say that a game is the Dark Souls of its genre, like Cuphead is the Dark Souls of platformers, or Ghosts and Goblins is the Dark Souls of arcade games, just to insinuate that a game is particularly punishing. And it's also looked down on to compare a game to Dark Souls just because it features dodge rolling or stamina cost and big swords. While Death's Door shares some surface level similarities with Dark Souls, including, yes, the ability to dodge and carry a big sword and die a whole bunch, I feel like it wears its influence proudly without trotting out the old horse of, "Oh, this game will make you rage because you die a lot." Because, and I literally have no idea what my skill level is as a gamer, so take this with a grain of salt, Death's Door is not that difficult nor quick-paced. Like I mentioned, you're not punished for dying. If you're having difficulty with a boss or an area, sure, you'll die. I died a lot to the bosses, and a lot to the mini-bosses, and a lot to the rooms full of dudes who shot at me from a distance while other dudes were grinding up on me. But mercifully, I wasn't set too far back at any point. Death's Door also eliminates my least favorite part of any Souls game, which is the walk from the bonfire to the boss room, which usually takes a few minutes, and it's filled with a bunch of regenerating bad boys who want to kill you before you can even get to the biggest, baddest boy who has your souls. In Death's Door, many times your checkpoint will be a door to the hub world that's right outside of a boss room. And if you die when you're fighting a bunch of dudes in a room, typically you'll have a seed pot in the room before, giving you a chance to refresh before or after the fight. I just really appreciate that there's no glorified self-flagellation in this, no walk of shame to go pick up your souls again, and no little butthole dogs that are waiting to take a bite out of you before you jump back into the real fight. The game wants you to keep playing it. So, I took a moment when I was writing my review to see if anybody has written about Death's Door being like Dark Souls, and I was happy to find an interview by Rebecca Valentine at IGN with the game's creators, David Fenn and Mark Foster, on the influence of Dark Souls on the game. Both Fenn and Foster have played the Souls games and are well aware of the influence that the games have had on the industry. Fenn is a big fan of the Souls franchise, while Foster prefers games like Zelda. He says in Valentine's interview that the Dark Souls franchise is practically a sequel to the very first Zelda game, in that it takes the original Zelda's formula and moves it along into the modern day. In that way, he says, you could say that games are all related in some way. And Fenn continues that idea, explaining that games are a sort of tapestry of influences. He says he likes the idea that everything you make is an amalgamation from all the things you've experienced and learned. But just because a game is influenced by other games doesn't mean it has to copy them unquestioningly and unwaveringly. Fenn and Foster deliberately diverged from the Souls formula when they worked on Death's Door. They actively worked to make something that wasn't so punishing. I mean that not in just that they worked against the genre, but they also worked against their own instincts as game designers. Fen told Valentine in the interview that whenever you're making something for a game, you always make it way too hard. And then there's an art to trying to figure out what it's going to be like for someone who isn't as experienced in the game as you, and then just tweaking and iterating with that in mind. It sounds like they wanted to focus on creating something that would have the right amount of challenge and engagement without being completely overwhelming to players, making them give up. By making the game more accessible in that manner, Foster said that they ended up having more fun making Death's Door. By the way, if you want to read that full interview, I've included a link to it in the description of this episode. It's an excellent read. Overall, from the gameplay alone, I would highly recommend Death's Door. It's fun, it's challenging, and it controls very well. It also looks very cute too. It feels like it accomplishes Fen and Foster's mission of making a game that's both engaging and accessible. It also offers great incentive for backtracking, which in a game like this can sometimes feel like a chore, but because it doesn't subject players to annoying enemy spawns and death punishments, exploration and backtracking feel like a natural part of the flow of Death's Door. Now, if you're still not convinced to check the game out, or if you've played Death's Door and you want to know my thoughts on other elements like the music, the story, and the post-credits gameplay, you'll have to wait for the next episode. So stay tuned for that. Now for this episode's question. When I'm streaming, I find it difficult to focus on audio cues and music because my brain is busy processing a bunch of visual information, split between the game and my chat. But now that I'm playing games offline, I feel like the music is surging to the forefront. So many games I've played lately have incredible soundtracks. So, I want to know, what are your favorite video game soundtracks? If you can identify two, maybe pick one old video game soundtrack and a more recent one. I found that it helps me write if I'm listening to some video game music, so please give me your recommendations. If you'd like to respond, you have a few different options. You can respond to the tweet I'm going to put out, or you can tweet directly at Games in the Glade on Twitter using the GITGasks hashtag. Or if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can leave a comment below the video. That's all I have for you today. There'll be more news and reviews every other week, so keep an eye out for updates in your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube, and follow the show's Twitter account at Games in the Glade for more. This podcast is supported by Friends of the Forest on Patreon, a link for which I'll leave in the description. Thanks to Puddles of Infinity for the use of their song Porches and Universes, and thank you to Titsay for the beautiful album art. And even though our time together is coming to an end, you can always find your way back here, my world-worn weary friend. There's a spot here in the clearing, in the quietude and shade, for you to relax a while and listen to Games in the Glade.